Shalom, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. I mentioned last week about the Tanya, which we started reading again from the beginning on Yutes Kislev of this year. And we'll go through the whole Tanya page by page, chapter by chapter during the course of the year. So I mentioned about the three levushim, the three garments that the Alter Rebbe goes into. Now, the fact is that the Alter Rebbe really gives an anatomy of creation in the Tanya. And it's fascinating how the Alter Rebbe looks at all of this creation and our role in it and our own individual makeup as human beings, as Jews. So during the course of the next few days, this week, I want to go into it a little bit as far as exploring it. And when we better understand what our anatomy is and what the anatomy of God's creation is, we can better understand our role in it and a lot of things from Chassidut, a lot of things from the Rebbe's teachings, a lot of things from Torah in general start to make a lot more sense because it's an unbelievable overview that the Alter Rebbe gives and infuses a perspective on life that really is important for each and every single one of us to understand. So during this week, hopefully we have a little bit more time because I'm not going to be able to do all these overviews in 3 to 5 minutes as I usually try to. So please have patience with me and we'll try to get through this. I'm going to split up into 3 different parts. First is, which we'll do today, hopefully, very shortly, is about the anatomy of creation as far as how God created our world on different levels, which I'll explain in a minute. Then we're going to go into tomorrow, hopefully, if we get to it, the anatomy of the world at large. And then the third part, we'll go into the anatomy of us as Jews and how all of these intermix and mesh and overlap and are made really to enable us to be able to fulfill our purpose. That the creation of the first two, the spiritual flow of energy that Hashem gives to the world in order to create it as it is, and then the physical world itself are all done in a way that we as Jews can be able to fulfill our purpose in this universe. So let's get started. First of all, the Alter Rebbe splits up all of the flow of godly energy that comes into the world into 3 parts. One is Kodesh, which means it's holy. 2 is it is Klippus Noga, which means that it is somewhat of a parv. It's not necessarily holy, but it's not evil either. It's not negative, so to say. And then there's Gimel Klippus HaTameus. There's the 3 ungodly or impure or really evil aspects of the creation. Now, where do these come from? What does it mean that God creates evil or creates negativity? So, not necessarily in Tanya, but in other places, the Alter Rebbe explains it, and of course it's explained at great length throughout Chassidus, the concept of Symptom. Symptom means contraction. Now, we believe that God created the world through this process of Symptom. I'm not going to go into all the details because the amount of books that describe this process just go on. You can fill this house with the amount of literature available from all the Rebbes, and then you go into Kabbalah and so forth and so on. It's really an amazing science almost as far as understanding how step by step this world was created. Be what it may, though, that God made it through this process of Tzimtzum. Now, just to use an example to explain to you what Tzimtzum means. Let's say, for instance, here on Long Island, we had the Shoreham nuclear reactor, which was closed down many years ago because of the potential danger of a nuclear reactor here on a small island. But let's say if it was up and running and the nuclear reactor core was going on, it was full blast, which means, let's say, just to pick out a figure, there was 1 trillion zillion watts of energy being generated in this nuclear reactor core. Now, the light bulb in back of me in the room that you might see is, let's say, a 60-watt bulb. So this 60-watt bulb has to get its energy from that nuclear reactor core. So what connection does it have? If you would make a direct line from the nuclear reactor core straight to that light bulb, then you know what's going to happen. It's going to blow to smithereens. So that's not going to work. So what do we have? We have transformers that the energy that goes in from the nuclear reactor core out in Shoreham comes through the transformers, and transformer by transformer, it eventually is minimized down to the point where there's good quality electricity. The energy is high quality. However, the quantity is minimized to the point that it can actually go into this light bulb and be able to make light through a 60-watt bulb. So similarly, the process of Symptom is very, very much like that. That there is a minimalization, if that's the proper word, of all of that godly energy coming from the essence of God, coming down step by step by step by step till it gets to the point where it's able to go into the 60-watt ball. Now, imagine that this world, the way we see it, we look around and we don't see godliness. Why don't we see godliness if this world is created by God? Because this world really exists on a level of, let's say, 3 watts. 3 godly watts create this whole world. It takes very little for Hashem to create the world. And that's a whole discussion by itself. But then you have, let's say, 4 watts, which would be something called Kodesh. Kodesh means it's closer to God than the 3 watts of the world itself. So it has a certain level of Kedusha, level of holiness, meaning it's closer to its source. And the 3 watts itself seems to be not really connected at all, because the 3 watts is contracted, is minimalized down to the point where the levush, the garment, the cover over it, the vessel over it, is so strong in order to be able to make it exist, to help it to come into being, that you really can't see the source where it's coming from. Just like on a person has a holy soul, but you can't see the soul because the body is really what makes it function on a regular basis as far as dealing in the world itself. So the world itself is perhaps 99% what we call klipas noga. Klipas noga is a very neutral, godly force which comes into the world. All the forests, all the trees, most of the vegetation, the oceans, the land, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom for the most part, and parts of the animal kingdom as well. So that takes up a lot of space. A big amount of klipas noga, which I'm going to talk about also as we get to the other classes later on in this week. So then you have things that are called klipa, gimel klipas atameus, which God created, so to say. They have the same appearance. I mean, a pig, for instance, which would be an ideal example of gimel klipas atameus, the 3 impurable, or impure but not purable aspects of creation. But they are created from a life force, the Alter Rebbe explains, which is so contracted that it hides over any godliness whatsoever, to the point that it can't be elevated. The 99% of the klipas noga, those things that are created at, let's say, 3 watts, those can be elevated, but they can also be brought down, as we're going to explain perhaps tomorrow. But the gimel klipas atameus can't be elevated at all, because they are pure negativity. Now, we don't say that they're -1, because they're nevertheless created by God. So let's say they're a 2 or a 1 in terms of their level. So there's just a bare trickle of godliness that's trickling into them to make them what they are. But they can still be maintained 100%. They don't suffer as a result of that. It's just the nature and the quality of the godly flow that comes into making them who and what they are is still Symptom. It's contracted to the point where it totally hides any source to godliness, at least for all practical purposes. So that's the anatomy of the world that God created according to the Alter Rebbe, with these 3 different types of flow. Now, everything above, let's say 4 watts, in the example that we're using from the nuclear reactor core, would be Kodesh, and there are many different levels of Kedusha. There are many different worlds, different levels for the Malachim, for the angels. Even in this world, there are different levels of Kedusha. Even in Israel, for instance, there are 10 different levels of holiness. And then you have different levels of holiness, let's say, for something that's directly a mandate or commandment right from the Torah, the 613 commandments. And you have those things that are coming from the Rabbanan, have a different level of Kedusha, of holiness. And you have minhagim, you have customs, which are a different level of Kedusha. So there are many different levels of holiness that we have around us. However, for all practical purposes, they start at, let's say, level 4 and go up for the purposes of our conversation. So we'll continue tomorrow, but remember, we're trying to adapt or understand the Alter Rebbe's anatomy of the world around us and of our own insides and how we work. And through this, hopefully, we'll be able to make better decisions, better choices in the 3 garments of the soul that we talked about last week, which are thought, speech, and action. Because all this is really in order that a Jew should be able to properly fulfill their purpose in the world and exercise their free choice in the realm of thought, speech, and action. Have a great day, and I can't say see you tomorrow, but you'll hopefully see me tomorrow.